Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Millennial Motoring, and today we're going to be putting axles on the S2000. The axles I purchased for the car are the Driveshaft Shop Level 2.9 V2 500 horsepower axles. Now, I'm never going to make 500 horsepower with this car, but I need some more durability. The stock axles are completely shot, and yeah, it was time to replace them, so I figured I might as well do an upgrade. Like I said, I'm never going to make 500 horsepower with this car. I'm not going to boost it. I'm not going to do anything like that with it. This car is going to stay NA. Maybe I'll make power later down the road, but I'm not going to be anywhere near 500, so these should be more than durable enough for what I'm trying to do with the car. Just track it and keep the car reliable. From everything that I can find, I couldn't find any instruction manuals or anything for putting these particular axles on. There was nothing that came in the box. It was just the axles, the hardware, and the spacer. I'll post in the description the S2KI threads that I found of other people using these axles that were useful to me in some way. But we're going to get the stock axles out first, and then we'll start digging into all that information in detail. Now, the Honda service manual tells you to jack the car up first. I don't want the handbrake or the regular brake to hold the wheel while I'm loosening the axle nut. So I'm just going to crack it loose while it's on the ground right now, and then jack it up so the weight of the car is holding it down and not the brakes or anything like that. Once we do that, we're going to remove the cotter pin from the lower arm ball joint, and we're going to pull the castle nut off. And then it wants you to separate the ball joint from the lower arm. You just have to remember to just be careful and not damage that ball joint, unless you're going to do ball joints at this time, which then, go ahead. Once you've done that, you're going to remove the wheel speed sensor from the upper control arm. Just remember to be extremely careful. It's a very expensive and sensitive sensor, so be very careful not to damage that on anything. Once you do that, you're going to pull the knuckle outward, separate the axle from the rear hub, and you're going to probably need to use a convincer just a little bit. And just be gentle with it. I know, if you're going to be... I'm probably not going to be reusing these, but I'm still going to be careful with them just because, I'd like to tear it apart and maybe rebuild it and sell it or something. But, yeah. So be careful with it. And that's the removal, and the installation is just do the opposite. So, yeah. Because the manual is telling me to take the castle nuts off, I got new castle nuts and cotter pins. I also bought new rear sway bar end links and front sway bar end links. Just because the boots on my current ones are torn and messed up, and if I'm already going to have the car up in the air today, I might as well just take care of that while I'm here. Okay, so driver side axle, passenger side axle. Driver side's a little bit shorter, so that matches up to the new axles. So the shorter one is going to go on the driver side, and the longer one goes on the passenger side. The spacer is going to go on the axle as such. This end is go into the diff side. Okay, so you're going to center it up, and you're going to put your long bolts through the axle side, and that's what's going to be received in the spacer. Now, there's no torque spec for this, so I'm going to use the Honda torque spec, which is 51 foot-pounds, and then once we get inside the car, this is going to go from the diff side through the spacer, and then we're going to use that at 51 foot-pounds as well. These bolts are 8, and these ones are 7s. And they're Allens. Now I did put some blue Loctite on this, and as I said, we're going to torque just the Honda factory spec at 51 foot-pounds.
3 weeks later.
Hi. So it's been 3.5 weeks since we filmed that first part of the video. Unfortunately, as Chris and I were jamming along in the groove of things, we felt that we had the one axle on the left side kind of in there enough for us to kind of pause, torque check everything, and then put the right side axle in. When I went back to the bench to grab this axle, something felt like it was missing, and I realized that the spacer was not in the box. Contacted Driveshaft shop, and they were like, yeah, sorry about that. It's going to be 3-4 weeks before we can get the spacer to you. I don't know the exact reason as to why they didn't have it or ship it in the first place, but I'll tell you from experience in the job that I work, stuff happens where you just don't have something in stock where the system shows that it does. It sounds like this was just a honest mistake where they just had a inventory count that wasn't correct and they just didn't have the spacer. It sucks because the car's been on jack stands for 3.5 weeks and almost 4. The design of this spacer, it's a little bit thinner than the other one. And these are kind of countersunk holes that the bolt is going to fit into. There's a nylock nut that's going to tighten down on the other side through the kind of diff flange, which will go right here. And yeah, these threaded holes here are where the long bolts go through the axle. It looks like the best method is to actually put the spacer onto the differential and then bolt the axle to the spacer, which that is opposite from what we experienced with the left side. You could put the spacer on first before you put the axle on the left side as well, but I just found that it was easier to put it on the axle, then put it in as one assembly. With the right side though, you do have to put the spacer in before you put the axle onto the car. In order to do that, I'm going to have to unbolt the axle back portion of my HKS exhaust to get access to the bolts and the nuts on the diff side. There's a beveled edge on the inside of the spacer, so you can line it up on that. So this side, the passenger side, as I showed before, it's more efficient to torque the spacer onto the differential itself before you throw the axle on, and then throw the axle on and torque it up. So the passenger side is in and fully torqued up. Now the problem on the driver's side is that I cannot find anything to fit in this gap. I have a 7mm Allen socket here, and the problem is I can't get it in there on its own. I can't even get it in. Obviously I'm not going to be able to get it in there with a wrench attached to it. Really my only options are to modify the hell out of this socket. If I have one thing to complain about the whole Driveshaft shop kit, this is it. Everything else I really like, the fit and finish of everything. Everything else is put together very well, but this is literally the worst. They understand the lack of clearance that you have here. Obviously this is a nylock nut and a Allen bolt. I kind of don't understand why they don't just get a hex head bolt for this, because they know the lack of clearance that you have here. Other than that, everything else is really nice and well put together. And yeah, so instead of this bolt that came in the kit, it's a very nice bolt. It's high quality. However, it's just the space of having a flat hex head bolt kind of in the small area that you have. It's just not practical. I went online to McMaster Car and bought this bolt. Now this is a grade 10.9, which is what is noted on this bolt as well. Obviously the head is a lot larger, but dimensionally the bolt is the same. It's an M10 by 1.5 by 25, 25 long. The heads are about the same height, it's just the diameter of this head is a lot larger because it's a hex head bolt instead of a Allen bolt. Now this is an ultra black bolt. You can look up kind of the corrosion resistance on this, but this is highly corrosion resistant, and since it's the same grade, it should be good for the application that we're using. I'm going to use the same lock washers that came in the Driveshaft shop kit, but I just wanted to use a hex head bolt instead of this Allen bolt because it's impossible to get a socket in here. Now with this bolt, you're going to need to get a crow's foot if you don't have one already. 17mm crow's foot, and this goes onto the end of your torque wrench. So this is a much better solution. So these are just in here hand tight now with some blue Loctite, and as with all the other bolts that I've installed, I'm using blue Loctite. Don't forget to paint mark your bolts once everything's torqued up, just so you remember that you've torqued everything. We're going to do the same drill over here on these ones. Let's torque them up. So these are all good to go. They're all torqued. They're all paint marked. And yeah, it's just time to button up the bottom. Don't forget to reinstall your exhaust. And don't forget to reinstall your wheel speed sensor that mounts to your upper control arm. Wipe it off. Try and get any debris that's off of it. And make sure it clears. Which I did here. I spun the axle a few times. A little worried that that side is off. This side is nice and square, nice and perfect. So we'll see how the other side reads. It is time to torque the axle nuts. So I have a Snap-on electric wrench that I'm borrowing from a friend of mine. Thank you, Chris. The factory torque spec is 180 foot-pounds, but it is common knowledge that it was way too low. They issued a TSB to 220 foot-pounds. But if you look around S2KI, there's a lot of threads that say go 180 and then 60 degrees. We're going to go with 220 foot-pounds for the axle nuts. I'm going to mark a line, drive it around for a little bit, come back, check and see where it's at. If the line does not move after torquing it to 220 and driving it around, then I'm going to leave it, stake it, and call the job done. Just going to hand tighten the axle nuts on as much as I can, put a little bit of grease on the back of the nut. Don't get it in the threads, but just put a little bit of grease on the back of the nut. That's 186 right there. That did not feel like a lot. So that's it. 4 weeks later, waiting for parts. Drove it around for a little bit to try and make it feel something. Just try and see if there was any kind of shifting or movement or clicking or anything like that. Everything's fine. Paint mark didn't move. The nut has not moved whatsoever. So everything there's good. So the car's fine. I did hear a clunk coming from the diff, so something I have to keep an eye on now. That's probably going to be the next upgrade, which we'll all see here. Overall though, the Driveshaft Shop S2000 axles are really, really nice, really high quality. My one nitpick about it is those bolts. Wasn't too much of a fan of those, so obviously I changed those out for the McMaster bolts, which the link to those ones is in the description. Part number for those McMaster bolts is 94863A210. That is the high strength class 10.9 steel hex head screw, black ultra corrosion resistant coated. It's an M10 by 1.5, 25 millimeter long. They come in packs of 5, so you have to buy 2 packs to get 4 extras, but you know, in case you strip one or something. I hope this helped somebody. I definitely needed it. I mean, if you look at it, there's no instructions or anything like that when you buy these things, but if you look at it, you go, okay, that makes sense, so puts it all together. But yeah, I just figured it'd be nice to have something that people could reference to kind of get an idea of what it looks like before they buy or while they're installing it. There are a couple points where I felt like I needed something just to verify that I was doing it correctly. Yeah, overall I really like the fit and finish of everything from the Driveshaft shop. The build is really nice on these things, so I'm looking forward to hitting the track and seeing how they perform out there. But from the quick drive I just did, everything feels fantastic, and yeah, really excited and looking forward to putting some miles on these things, some track miles, some street miles, and kind of feeling what they are meant for. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. If you liked the video, if it was helpful to you in any way, hit the like button, comment below what you thought was helpful. If you're interested in other non-install related videos, Millennial Machine Check is a series that I just started. It's kind of like the old hot version videos, and we do kind of cool edits from time to time as well. Stay tuned for more of those videos, quick hangs and machine checks. I also have a 77 Datsun parked behind me. That car needs a few things, so there's a series on that called Revision. I'm not calling it a restoration because it definitely is not that, but just the process of slowly improving it over time. So stay tuned for that. Thank you guys for watching again. I hope this was helpful to somebody.